I think I only appear smart by staying as quiet as often as possible. Sally Rooney, Conversations with Friends. You're listening to AMI Audiobook Review on AMI Audio. I'm your host, Jacob Szymanski. That's Sally Rooney kicking us off with an observation on how we think, about what we think about quiet people. And that's that, honestly, we don't really know what to think because we really don't have much to go off of. And so if they're not talking, we just assume that they're thinking deeply, like quiet geniuses perpetually intellectualizing. But Rams, I'll tell you right now, as a quiet person, correct. That could not be more true. I am always intellectualizing. No, that's not true. I think of the dumbest things all the time when I'm quiet. It's not like that. I'm telling you, this perception that if you're quiet, you're always pondering and being intelligent is just not true. I mean, speaking for myself. But I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, you're allowed to do whatever you want when it's just you pondering.
It's my brain. You don't have to judge me for it.
You have full access and full control and, independence. But the thing is, I'm thinking about, I went the next step and I'm like, oh my gosh, but when really smart people are talking to you or you're listening to things that smart people are saying and then you're like, I'm tapping out of this. I have no idea what's going on. I heard Joe Rogan say that when he was talking to Elon Musk during a podcast episode. He's like, my mind just... it hung on the first thing he said, and then he just went down a fantasy realm of that, and then he had to tune back in. He's like,
when you just have to check out because the difficulty level is too high, you're like, nope, this is not for me.
If it's independent thought, yeah, man, do whatever you want.
The funny thing is sometimes that happens with books, especially nonfiction, right?
Yeah, and audiobooks in general, because it's active.
The other interesting thing I find about this quote is that it's not really an observation made by Sally Rooney herself. It's made by one of her characters, so obviously that doesn't mean that Sally Rooney agrees with it. It just means that character agrees with it. Yeah. And it says something about that character, but I bring this up because it drives me nuts when reviewers think that the values of a character reflect the values of an author. You see this all the time, man. It goes back to media literacy and understanding what you're reading and just being able to separate the character from the author happens all the time.
Because imagine all the deep dive characters we get from Stephen King, and if that's just who we thought Stephen King was,
this dude's a psycho.
Yeah, messed up. I'm thinking of Misery and all the wild stuff that was going on in that internal monologue with whoever that protagonist's name is.
Was it Sheldon?
What's his name? Is that his name? I don't know, but he was
2 syllables.
Trapped and going, he was losing his mind, and I'm thinking if that was Stephen King, okay. I
mean, he's very open that book, the main character, he's a self-insert. Because his author gets kidnapped. Did he say that? 100%.
Isn't that wild that I picked that book to say ironically then? Wow. Okay.
Well, yeah, unironically, he's a self-insert
that
in
was
that
Stephen King.
Yeah.
to prove this point. Absolutely wrong.
Maybe the worst reflections of himself. I don't know. He seems like a humble dude and the type of guy that would bring himself down a peg in his own representations. But what are we doing today, Rams?
What? Oh, you want me to tell people what we're doing?
Yeah,
okay,
tell us what we're doing.
Throwing me there. We're doing basically a year-end review, but it's a collective review of all of people's top reads of 2024. And I say you, the people, because we reached out to the community, our favorite fellow bookworms in Amr's book club and other book clubs. We have contributors from the show. We have contributors from AMI. We have
friends, family, coworkers. Honestly, we got tons of responses.
We did. I'm so excited to go through them.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. And we're not doing this on our own. We're also bringing in AMI's Dave Brown because the more the merrier. How's it going, Dave?
Hey, Jacob. Hey, Rums. Nobody's ever accused me of being quiet or smart. So that kind of lets you know where Sally's quote lands with me.
No one's accused you of being smart. That is a lie.
Well, I hope nobody's called you loud and dumb.
You'd be surprised who hangs out with me sometimes.
So how do you guys want to do this? Just one at a time? We have some written submissions. We have some audio clips that people sent us. Honestly, you can find all sorts of lists online of the best books of 2024, but think of this like each recommendation has a personal touch to it. This is one person recommending it as the best book they've read in the entire year, and a lot of these people read a ton of books, so
and
there's
I asked
weight
people
behind
to give
this.
me their one top pick. I was like, guys, tell me what you read, why it stuck with you. And then people were sending me lists of 5 and 6 and 10. So we did our best to like make sure that whatever you sent is coming into the show. But please follow instructions. Come on.
I don't know where people are finding all the time to read all these books. Ramya, you're saying one, the first one I've got here, there's like 6 or 7 recommendations. It's like, isn't that every book you read this year? Was every book you read the best book you read?
Oh, yeah. Okay, tell us about Karoline.
Okay, Karoline Bourdeau. She has a couple here. One is called But You Don't Look Arab and Other Tales of Unbelonging by Hala Gorani. The Rulebreaker, The Life and Times of Barbara Walters by Susan Page. This Summer Will Be Different by Carley Fortune. The Women by Kristin Hanna. Dancing in Small Spaces, One Couple's Journey with Parkinson's Disease and Lewy Body Dementia by Leslie A. Davidson. And here's what Karoline had to say. All of those books have left me either stunned or thoughtful. I think You Don't Look Arab is one that will stay with me the longest because there was so much packed in that statement alone. Also, the stories from the author are incredible, and she reads her own book. So big thank you to Karoline for sending that in.
Thank you, Karoline. Okay, so one book we read and reviewed on AMI Audiobook Review, that's This Summer Will Be Different by Carley Fortune. We talked about it a lot, but I'm just sending people reminders to go check out the episodes from earlier this year. And we will be reviewing The Woman by Kristin Hanna in January. I'm looking forward to that one.
So it just goes to show that on this show, we always review the best books.
Yeah.
We wouldn't tell you to read some garbage.
Books, yours and mine.
What do you guys make of the last thing Karoline put there, saying that she reads her own book? I know you guys have talked a little bit before about the narrators, whether it be digital narration or human narration. Where do you guys land on author narration?
Author rating? Yeah, we have a favorite author rater here on this show, Julia. Well, now I said that and I can't think of her last name.
Julia Whalen. She's
Thank
the best.
you, Julia Whalen. Sorry, Julia. We actually love you. And she does an impeccable job because of her performance background and theater background, and her books have been epic as well. And My Oxford Year was my favorite by her, but Thank You for Listening is a close second. And that is just like, you know, an ideal representation of author rating. But Dave, we're not going to lie to you. We have definitely talked about books that we said, can't you pick somebody else to narrate this? Because just stick to the author job. Have you had any personal experience to review on that?
I like it when someone can authentically read their own words, but I do think there's a difference between fiction and nonfiction.
True.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the world of nonfiction, I like it when Barack Obama reads his own book in his own words with his personality, as long as that may have been, 24 hours or whatever that audiobook was, and gosh knows how many pages. But I think when you're getting into the world of fiction, when you're getting more into the storytelling, that's when leave it to the professionals like me, Jacob, and Ramya.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Is there something you don't know? What is AMI planned? Are we
Quiet,
transitioning
smart,
into
and
audiobook
very good
production?
author.
What are we doing?
I don't know about you guys. I've been offered a couple opportunities to read audiobooks. I haven't done it because talked to my agent. Yeah, I have.
Wow.
Talked to my agent. The money wasn't right for the amount of time it was going to take. There's a little humble brag by Dave Brown here.
Dave, you have an agent?
Yeah, personal.
Sometimes.
It's part-time agent.
Sometimes.
Do you have a lawyer? Depends.
I do. Well, I do. I do have a lawyer as well. There's a few people in life you need to trust: your dentist, your lawyer, and if you have a car, a mechanic.
Oh, snap.
In your case, a press secretary. You know.
Yeah, my handlers, my
Your
personal
accountant.
chef.
You're right.
My accountant is still my mom.
Oh.
But you know, for author rating, we always talk about how the role of a narrator is a lot of interpretation and interpreting the tone of a book. And when you're narrating your own book, there's no interpretation there because the author perfectly understood what they were going for. But it takes an incredible skill set to be a good author and a good narrator. And that's what Julia Whalen is. Seriously, her audiobooks are amazing.
They're
The
so
performance is next level. And I have a feeling she writes characters with accents that she can do because
That's smart, though.
her vocal range is incredible.
Yeah. That's smart. I mean, like, that's her full time too, right? Like, I think the authoring came much later for her, but she was doing voice work and theater work for a really long time. So when she started writing, it's like she could picture how she would read this book.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
think
done so well. It's curated.
she has over 300 books to her credit on Audible, but only about 3 books that she's authored herself. But those 3 books she narrates. Let's move on to the next submission from Terry Bray. The Wandering Inn, Book 1 of the Wandering Inn series, written by Pirate Iba. There are 14 books in this series so far, and I've read all of them this year. They're awesome books. Synopsis. The Wandering Inn series by Pirate Iba is a sprawling and richly detailed web serial that blends elements of fantasy, adventure, and slice-of-life storytelling. It's set in a magical world called In-World, where people from Earth occasionally get transported. It even has gaining special abilities akin to an RPG leveling system. At its heart, it follows Erin Solstice, a young woman from Earth who unexpectedly finds herself in this new world and decides to open an inn. Note: the world is intricately constructed with unique magical creatures, diverse cultures, and complex political systems. The RPG-like leveling system is a core mechanic where characters gain skills and abilities tied to their roles, such as Innkeeper, Warrior, or Mage. This is such a deep cut. I've actually read this one, and this is really... First of all, it's a ridiculously long series. It's one of the longest fantasy series ever written. There are 14 books. The shortest one is like 40 hours. The first book is 40 hours. Get this. The second book was 60 hours.
Get out of here.
And it's the same narrator who does the entire thing. She's really, really good. But the reason it works is because this thing, it was released as episodic, like basically like blogging. For years, Pirate Iba, that's
like within
pseudonym.
the books?
No, not within the books.
Oh, thank God.
Like in the real world, it was this person she's anonymous, and she publishes these things like, I think it was like once per week. She released a chapter for years and years.
Okay, that's
and
what I meant. So it was like
compilation.
it wasn't, she vlogged the entire book. She vlogged a chapter at a time.
A chapter at a time. And it's become like one of the
No wonder
longest
it's never
series
ending.
ever. But it's also very episodic in a way that's super digestible. So you can just pick up one chapter and there's a very clear like start and end. And it feels almost like a soap opera because that slice of life part of it is... I think is a huge part of the appeal because it's not somebody going out to war and settling political scores and stuff like that. There's no grandiose plot or anything like that. It just sort of follows this one woman and her inn, which is like a hotel / restaurant. And it's really quirky, super fun. I'm so glad you brought this up though, because Pirate Iba deserves some love. So shout out to The Wandering Inn by Pirate Iba.
I should have guessed to ask you if you had read this, but I am still in disbelief that you guys read all of the books. You read all the books.
I did not read all of the
okay,
books. I read one book and the first half of the second book. That's still
and gave up?
70 hours.
Okay.
Only about 100 more hours to go, Jacob.
Yeah.
No kidding. And I mean, Jacob reads so much fantasy. Like, sometimes I think all he reads is fantasy, but it's not true because he brings up other books on the show all the time. But they're just so long, Dave. Like, I could never look at a thing that said 40 hours and say, yeah, I'm going to pick this up.
You see the percentage and you've been sitting there. You feel like you've been reading it for a month, 20%. Oh my God. This is going to finish.
Why do you think I bring up Gone with the Wind so much? Because I'm so proud of myself for sitting through the audiobook.
I love the intricacy of the universe building that's being described there, though. That's the kind of element that lets you tell an extended story. If you think about some of the greatest fantasy stories of all time, certainly in the mainstream, A Song of Ice and Fire or Lord of the Rings, it's about the world the author creates that then allows them to tell whatever spin-off story they want.
Yeah, the world building is a huge part of the appeal for fantasy and sci-fi because you learn about the world as if it's its own character, and the way other worlds are constructed often say a lot about our own, what could be and how things used to be. But also just commentary on where we're at right now, like in the real world. And speaking of the world building, he mentioned it briefly, like the RPG mechanics. This is the strangest thing. This whole series falls into a weird subgenre called lit RPG, which is like fantasy and sci-fi that incorporates elements of video games, like
I'd never heard of
inventory
this.
management and
like done on
leveling up and gaining special skills. Like, for example, Aaron Solstice, the main character, gains class bonuses in, innkeeping and charisma and stuff like that. It's the weirdest thing. But it sounds
But it makes
goofy,
sense.
but once the system is developed, it becomes part of the plot and the world in a way that makes sense and is logical and is honestly awesome.
It's the rules of the universe. Also, Lit RPG sounds like a really rowdy Dungeons and Dragons party.
It's pretty lit.
Okay, wicked. Let's listen to Greg David. We say listen because he sent us an audio submission for his top reads of 2024.
Hey Ramya, Jacob, and all AMI audiobook review listeners out there. This is Greg David with my choice for one of my top reads for 2024. It's the novel Closer by Sea by Perry Chafe. Newfoundlander Perry Chafe has created and written several Canadian television shows, including Republic of Doyle for CBC and Frontier for Discovery. This is his first novel, and it's the story of 12-year-old Pierce Jacobs. Pierce, whose father died in a fishing accident, finds he and his friends embroiled in the search for a missing schoolmate amid dwindling fishing in the area and environmental concerns. Part mystery, part coming-of-age tale, part peek at life on an island off the east coast of Canada, Closer by Sea reminded me of the Stephen King story Stand By Me for all the right reasons. Check it out.
Greg David, that's a man you can tell writes press releases, eh?
Yeah. He's got all the information in there for us in the headline. But yeah, historical fiction kind of stuff is what he usually reads, but also the homage to Stephen King right there at the end. Very loyal of Greg David.
We're huge fans of Stephen King, not just in AMI audiobook
the
review, but it
hugest.
seems like a lot of people at AMI, just generally. People love Stephen King.
Yeah.
The legend of Stephen King is only growing.
Yeah, I mean, actually. But I haven't read Stand By Me, though. That's not even on the next.
Yeah, historical fiction coming from Greg David, but I also want to give him a shout out for his recommendation of The Company, which was an awesome nonfiction about the Hudson's Bay Company. It sounds boring, but the stories that have to do around the fur trade and everything that was done to exploit it by this massive corporation that was like the first of its kind. Fascinating read, and he gave us that shout out. So that's The Company. I forget the author.
I don't remember either, but it was one of the books that I had to read in synth audio because I couldn't handle the narration.
What was wrong with the narration?
It was just recorded a long time ago. You could tell that it was recorded a long time ago. I had to speed it up a lot, which then defeated the purpose of me trying to learn anything by reading this nonfiction book. So anyways, I just skipped over to reading it like an hour
You
ago.
tried. What's
Yeah.
next?
I tried with voiceover. Julie Martin is someone who joins us often to talk books, and she says The Woman in the White Kimono. This is a book that I'll never forget reading. It absolutely had a profound effect on me. She also says I enjoyed reading None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. Yes. And Just Another Missing Person by Gillian McAllister. Both of these books had twists and turns that I never saw coming. Lots of twists and turns being mentioned this half of the year. We haven't really, we haven't reviewed a mystery in a while, I think, on AMI Audiobook Review, have we?
I don't know what that says about us. It seems like there's like the opposite spectrum of mystery, where some people love it when a book has a formula and almost is like predictable. Like, it's the holidays right now. People love Hallmark movies because they have this formula and you know what to expect. And then when a book takes a bunch of twists and turns and is super unpredictable, it's the exact opposite of having a formula.
That's true.
But I don't know why we're not reading mystery.
You know, there's always the argument that if it takes place around Christmas, or if there's a Christmas tree in the background, or you're walking around in snow, then it could be anything. It doesn't have to be a cozy Christmas vibe.
Yeah.
From a production point of view, sorry guys, this might be going a little too behind the curtain, but I know you guys don't mind doing spoilers on the audiobook review. In fact, you explicitly tell people you're going to get this spoiled, so go read it or come back later. But with a mystery, that to a certain degree, the spoilers are really important on that one. So it's sort of that extra double, triple, quadruple spoiler alert.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
I think what is it called? Was it called The Woman? We did this with
Beware the
Sarah
Woman.
Fair.
Yeah,
Beware
that was
the
an
Woman.
awesome. That was a great book.
It was so good. By Megan Abbott. Okay, I
Yeah.
found it. So we reviewed this with Sarah Fair earlier this year. I can't believe that was 2024. Guys, like time flies. But we did that review. We spoiled the heck out of it, but I wouldn't even really call it a plot twist as much as it was like, you're just waiting for whatever it is to drop. It was like the mystery held out forever in this book, Dave. It's like 95% you're just holding your breath, and then the last 5% you're like, oh, whew. Okay,
Yeah, so if you
glad.
knew what the mystery was, like from the start, then that whole book would be pointless. So
Yes.
perfect example of a book where having it be spoiled before you read it just kind of
Yeah.
ruins the point of reading it.
It was still a great book, though, but all you were doing was just holding your breath for whatever that was. Like, figuring it out.
And you
Girl on
knew
the train was similar
right
to me.
away there was something up with this family, with this doctor.
Yeah.
And you knew eventually it was going to be revealed. And the whole
Yeah.
book is just cranking up the tension, the suspense, cranking up until like 95%.
But you don't even know what
where you
it
find
is
out.
yet.
Yeah, you have no clue.
You know,
not
like-
even hints.
Usually you start, right, with a murder or someone's missing or whatever it is. The mystery is revealed. And then you're plotting and putting together suspects and fixing the puzzle. But with this, you're just like, what is up anyway? And it's that tension and that eerie feeling is what's keeping you through the book.
Foreboding, sense of dread.
You can tell you read a lot of books, Rams.
Totally. All right, Danielle McLaughlin. Next on the
Ooh,
line.
okay. Yeah, big hello and thank you to Danielle for sending this in. Danielle says, I just finished reading a book that has me thinking about being in a park. The book, published in 2024, is entitled The Anthropologists, is by a young Turkish writer. Oh boy, thanks for giving me this one, guys. Asugul Saves. On its face, it is a simple story of a young filmmaker, her husband, and their friends who live as expats in an unnamed city. The film she is working on, as the story evolved, involves her going regularly to her public park, interviewing the people she sees there. Why are they there? Do they have a regular park visit routine? What does the park mean to them? I found myself going to my local park today, looking around at myself and others, wondering the same things. At which part of this large park is most important to me? The book has made me look at ordinary things in a different way. I really like a book that can do that. 2 of the author's previous books are available at CELA. That's the Center for Equitable Library Access. That's my editorial. But this newest one is not yet listed on CELA's website. Big thank you to Danielle for sending that in.
Danielle McLaughlin, always with the most thoughtful answers. Seriously, when a book makes you see things differently, you know it's done something right. Can you guys think of an example of that?
Ooh. That Jacob throwing us on the spot here. I think some of it is ethical dilemmas, right? What would you do if you were faced in this situation? Would you be brave enough to do this? I'm trying to remember the name of the author. I think it was Will Ferguson, who writes this book about a daughter investigating the death of her father that involves her traveling all over the world to unspool the mystery. And it makes you ask the question, like, would I be able to go this far or do this much just to find a piece of information?
I was going to say, does Eat, Pray, Love count? Because people use that as an excuse to travel always.
Slightly different than trying to figure out the murder of your father.
In this category, I'm thinking about Speaking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. And what that one showed me was that so many conflicts are caused by misunderstandings, by simple misunderstandings. And that when you have conflict with someone, it's important to really understand where other people are coming from, because literally the majority of time it's misunderstandings and bad communication that are causing problems. And you know how Malcolm Gladwell is, like, he's very compelling in the way that he writes. He's also a bit controversial.
Oh yeah.
For people have called his stuff a little bit like pseudoscience, saying things as if they were fact, but they're more observations. I still find that if you approach this book as very keen observations, you can glean a lot from them anyways.
I thought about another book in a moment that begged a question for me, but it was more of a journalistic question. I don't know if you guys ever read Everything is Illuminated by Jonathan Safran Foer, about a grandson going to find out more about his grandfather's experience in Ukraine during World War II. And it's a multi-narrator book, and as you guys have learned from me over the years, I love myself a multi-narrator book. At one point, one of the narrators begs the other narrator not to tell what they found out.
Oh, wow.
And it sort of begs this interesting journalistic question of, if you find out something that's awful, do you have the stones to tell it?
Ooh. There's a lot of with these ethical dilemmas. That's really interesting. Okay, well, the rest of us will think, though.
Sorry, Dave, that's a great point. I mean, we see horrible stories coming out regularly in the news, and it just makes you wonder if there's stuff that's so bad that the CBC, Global, CTV, just refuse to publish. Or the journalists come around it and they're like, yeah, I'm not writing this story.
Yeah,
I don't want to be the person responsible for this.
It's everywhere now.
Yeah.
Which part of the call-out culture, right, that comes up now is a reaction to that even.
Yeah, it's true. How about we get somebody else to call out their favorite book of the year in a positive way? This is a comedy. What's her name? Comedy.
Comedy Rodhan.
Hi, Jacob and everybody at the audiobook review. Okay, I think I was able to come up with one book for 2024. It's extremely hard to choose one book, but I got one. It's called Demon Copperhead, and it's written by Barbara Kingsolver. I was actually very hesitant to read this book just because of the strange title. But if you read it, you'll understand, I guess, why the book is titled Demon Copperhead. But I really enjoyed the book, and it was one of the best books that I read in 2024 or in the past few years, because I noticed there is not a lack of, or there are many books out there that are women oriented, and I was really happy to read a really good book that was about a male character. It's basically a journey of a boy and his life from boyhood to when he becomes a young man, and everything that happens between that time. And I just thought it was great, very well written, and a really good read.
So that was Demon Copperhead. Comedy is recommending that one, but that's a wild take to say that nowadays there's a lack of books that are male-centric. Not that wild, though, because we've had this talk with Karen McKay and Teresa Power of Sela that the publishing industry is dominated by women. It seems like the tastes of women get catered to a lot more, which is why you see so many romance books be published and marketed. And it's not just that, it's that in the publishing industry, like, a majority of the employees are women by huge amounts.
Yeah, I don't remember if there was more like who it was, who else reviewed this book, because I know a lot of people read it this year particularly. But there was a lot of, I think, surprise in how interesting they found Demon Copperhead. Is that what it's called?
Demon Copperhead, yeah.
Yeah. Interest in how surprising they found, like, I guess the writing style, as Kamini said, is one point, but also just the enjoyment or the depth of it and getting into it. Because a lot of people, I think, at the beginning were just like, I'm not sure about what to expect in a book. And for people, like, I guess this is a personal take as well, but I don't know how often I would go into a book if I'm not sure of what I'm expecting from it. And Jacob, you've talked about this before, like researching what a read is going to be like, the intention of an author on what they've written, etc. But also, if it's a recommendation of a book club and we're all going to review something together, that's part of the intention of why we're reading.
Yeah, you know where I stand on this. I think you should do a minimal amount of research before you read any book. At the very minimum, read the synopsis and try to find some spoiler-free reviews. Ideally, something that's like middle of the line, you know, like 3-4 stars or something like that. Because if you go into the book with the wrong expectations, you're looking for the wrong things out of it, and you're not in tune with what the author is trying to do. If you think the author is trying to deliver a mystery, but what they're actually trying to deliver is a romance, you're going to be like, this is the worst mystery I've ever read.
I'll confess something here, guys. I don't know anything about the book that was being referenced there, Demon Copperhead, but when someone talks about how the style of writing is different or it feels different, that was something that was very common in 20th century literature, whether it was almost everything that Martin Amis wrote in terms of style and substance, or whether it was linguistically, like in Naked Lunch or A Clockwork Orange, or maybe even to a certain degree what Kerouac was doing with sort of his train of thought writing. It's interesting to think about how style can change how you approach a read. And I wonder how that changes even more in an audiobook format. Like if you tried to listen to A Clockwork Orange knowing that it was written in essentially a different language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point too. And when we reviewed Patriot by Alexei Navalny, I can't say his last name properly, sorry. It was a similar concept for me. Like as I was reading through the book, I'm thinking, but this is a translation. And not necessarily are we getting the right stuff, because I think that's pretty obvious. We're getting the right stuff. It's nonfiction, it's account, it's translated well, but also just what are we missing because it's a translation? And that's like a rabbit hole I went down as I was reading.
And it affects the style.
Yep.
But by the style, we're talking about the writing style, but also just how the writing makes you feel. Is it frantic? Is it slow? Is it flowery? Is it direct? Is it verbose? That type of thing. And I think when it applies to audiobooks, there's certain styles that translate better to audiobooks. More conversational, realistic dialogue and inner monologues just make more sense when they're spoken out loud. But something that's more, frantic, artsy, doesn't necessarily follow the rules of writing. I'm thinking of John Steinbeck, who writes with a ton of commas and super long sentences.
Yeah.
You need a narrator with big lungs.
Some things are better, and some things are better read out loud. They sound, they're written to be read out loud versus written to be, read in your head or seen, right?
Forgive me that I'm totally derailing the conversation here, but do you think as the popularity of audiobooks increases, because there's no doubt that they are on the increase, do you think that may change the way authors put fingertip to keyboard or pen to paper in how they write?
Yeah, it's already happening. We talked about how you're kind of catering writing for the next best TV hit or the next best limited series, right? Like there are a lot of authors who have their own particular style, but I think it's very obvious that their books make for great movies, for great TV, and you can even see transitionally how authors are doing that. People who've been in the scene for a really long time that now know that this could captivate an audience in a different way. It's becoming more and more intentional than before, where you would pluck out a book and say, make this TV.
I know that in fantasy and sci-fi, those are the most popular genres for audiobooks, where I'm taking Brandon Sanderson, who's the most popular fantasy writers right now. More than 50% of his books get bought as audiobooks. And so things that you would typically have in a fantasy book, like often you get like an index or a list of characters or even a map, that type of thing, doesn't translate well to audiobooks. And so they have to like direct you to like his website where there's a glossary and like a wiki on his world and stuff like that. So in that aspect, he kind of does acknowledge that you kind of need to make adaptations for audiobooks from the start. And I don't know if it changes the writing style that much. Honestly,
At
I
least
think
it's an acknowledgement. There's
Yes.
acknowledgement. When you listen to some audiobooks like Jeff Gunther, his latest book, Big Dating Energy, he recorded it as an audiobook and made very clear references to why this is the audiobook version. Like you're listening to the audiobook version, he's not just reading out the print version. So it's there, clearly.
Amr Khan sent us a written submission. He's a regular contributor to the show. We love doing reviews with him. This is what he wrote. Vox by Christina Dalcher. That book came out in 2018. Imagine a dystopian world where women are limited to 100 words to be spoken aloud a day, enforced by an electric shock watch. Jesus. As the reader learns how this came to be in America, it's chilling at how possible this sort of dystopian reality can be. And then he also adds the Will Trent series by Corinne Slaughter. Not for everyone due to the violence level. The stories of GBI agent Will Trent are told in gripping suspense, tender romance, and classic thrillers. From a book set in 1970s Atlanta, featuring female detectives, to a mother finding her daughter not murdered, to understanding small-town politics, the novels are bestsellers for a good reason. And then he has a third one. And so we were saying, people sent huge lists. We got to narrow him down to 3 books. Thanks, Amr. Also, sorry, Amr. The Love Match by Priyanka Taslim. A second-generation Bengali girl in New Jersey is trying to make it in the world after the loss of her father. As the eldest, she's trying to figure out how to balance the line between tradition, financial need, her own desires, and how the world conspires against her. Have you guys read any of these 3 books? Vox sounds fascinating to me.
Vox he's been talking about for a while now. I still haven't picked it up, but it sounds really interesting. Very dystopian, obviously. I've read parts of the Will Trent series, and I was a huge fan. Karen Slaughter has other series as well that people are fond of. But the Will Trent series, I'll say spoiler alert just in case, but I don't think it is much of a spoiler. The detective himself has like dyslexia and other invisible disabilities. And he goes through a lot of like interesting experiences where he doesn't want to disclose, where he's working for a boss who kind of knows but nobody's talking about, elephant in the room stuff. And it's very well written. It's very tasteful representation of disability. It's interesting, like the takes of the mystery. I would say not cookie cutter mystery detective novels, but it's done the way that you would expect it to be done, generally speaking.
It's cookie cutter, but I mean, we all like cookies.
Yeah. Okay. Good job. Okay, want to listen to another audio submission. This one is by Carol Yapel.
Hi, Ramya and Jacob. This is Carol Yapel in Vancouver, and I wanted to tell you about a couple of my favorite books from 2024. One is called Vision, a memoir of blindness and justice, and it's by David Tatel, who was a U.S. federal judge for many years with RP, and it's the story of his life of being a blind judge and all of the civil rights work he did, and then also his getting a German Shepherd guide dog in his 70s, which totally changed his life completely. It's a wonderful read. And the other book is called Small Things Like These by the Irish writer Claire Keegan. It's a beautiful Christmas story just made into a motion picture, and incredible book. Thanks a lot. Happy holidays.
I would totally pick up that first book.
I think somebody else mentioned it on Audiobook Review, but yeah, that seems like a really interesting one.
Okay.
I forget who, but you know what? I'm kind of chuckling a little bit because a blind judge plays into that stereotype of the the blind
justice?
prophet, blind justice. This,
Okay.
this like imagine you're a criminal and you find
stretch.
out like the judge is blind. You're like, wow, this is like the best judge ever. Like he's
You
like
found
in
out later,
tune.
it doesn't count.
There you go.
I think anytime you get to an autobiography or biography about disability in a different era, because let's be clear, the 1970s and 1980s were a different era, right? They were before all of our times. It does give you a sense of perspective of progress versus similarities. What may have been similar barriers that faced somebody in the 60s, 70s, or 80s may still exist today, but how the world and how to adapt is a totally different place. And reading biographies about or autobiographies about disability in different eras can be really illuminating for people like us and our own experiences.
Because you can separate what has changed and what hasn't changed. And often what changed is the language, but not policies.
Yes. Okay, so we're at a crossroads right here. Okay, Jacob, we have like 15 minutes left of the show. We have at least 5 to 6 minutes more of audio clip, like worth of audio clips. And then we have your top 3 books.
Okay, no, I think we got to give it to the people.
What a gracious host.
No, who's the next audio clip? Who do we have here? Kelly McDonald. Let's go.
Hi, everyone. The best of the season to you. Mitch Albom's Tuesdays with Maury's. I think that's got to be my read of the year. It was a close tie. We read another book in our book club on the show that really... it was almost neck and neck with them for me for my books of the year. I tend to stick to a lot of the same kind of stuff, police procedure and things like that. But this book, going back to 1997, which Mitch Albom highlights the story of meeting with Maury Schwartz, his professor, as Maury is declining in health and eventually passes away around Halloween. It really was tremendous to me to relive that. I had started reading the book and never did finish it. A friend of mine and I had been really talking about it, and I think I had learned about 15 years ago, maybe even further from her about it, and it was a top-selling book. So got it. What I really enjoyed is there's so much joy in it. So many unique things about this character, this professor, a real-life person who you love because not the situation he's in, the way he tackles it, the way he would like it documented, but also the descriptions that Mitch gives of him, which are the man himself, his wife, his life, the thought of going to see him on Tuesdays, which is the whole premise of Mitch's story, as he's declining, as he talks with him, as he makes notation, writes everything down because of the analytical personality the professor has. And we get to ride along and learn all about him, but in the most comfortable ways. Not all bleak, with somebody who you've done all the heavy lifting at the beginning, has accepted the fate. Yes, there are those moments where you see the suffering that's described to you by Mitch, but as you go along, you flash back to different times in his life, different stories, and what those lessons, as we read, we're getting from them, or can relate to, I guess. If you're older, you might say, I remember that happening. If you're younger, you might say, really? And you are able to believe that Mitch, working in sports at the time, was able to do this, spending that time once a week with his professor. An incredible endeavor, especially since they had been out of touch for so long since he had left school while Mitch put his life together. So Tuesdays with Maury, my book that I read this year from 1997, tremendous book to go back and revisit or read for a first time, because it is so still relevant today as we always deal with illness and life. Also for me, it prompted me to go back and read other things. I'm not a big go back and read a book again. But I've been reading some things that my dad read to me when I was a child. Yeah, back in the private detective kind of genre. But it's led me to go down some other rabbit holes on YouTube, because now I can do that. Whereas even then, when I was a little kid having him read the stuff to me, I had no idea of the culture, the history that went before these. So if you get an opportunity, I will acknowledge maybe that's a good thing to check something out again. Not Harry Potter 500 times over. Come on, guys. That's just too recent. Right, Rummy?
Just had to sneak that in there. Yeah. Thanks,
Shots fired.
Oh, man. Kel.
Immediately.
Maybe don't read Tuesdays in Maury with public unless you're very comfortable crying in public.
Do you have experience with that, Dave?
Oh yeah. I did a death and dying class when I was in CJEP, and we read Tuesdays with Maury, and I was reading it on the bus. And as I've told Ramya a couple times, I've got a couple horror stories of reading on the bus and breaking down crying.
One breath. What was it? What's the other one?
A fine balance. The unbearable lightness of being was me crying at a soccer field. So yeah, it turns out I cry a lot in public when I read.
I'm gonna read all the books that made you cry. Like this is like an actual bucket list for me. What made Dave cry? Next book.
You studied Tuesdays with Maury in a death and what class in CJEP?
It was a death and dying class.
Dying class.
Yeah.
Oh my. Okay, so that
Put
tells
you
you a
guys
little
through
bit
it,
about the
so,
content of Tuesdays with Maury. If you're into that type of thing.
But Kelly's right though. Kelly's right. It's done so
joyful.
Yes, and it's a deep exploration. Nothing is left off the table. You can sense the discomfort of everybody else, by the way, like Mitch Albom himself and other like interviewers and people who talked to the professor during that time. There's audio clips that show how it was in real time, but the philosophy itself, like you just got to get into it with him. You got to get into it. And I guess the perfect person to have written that book was Mitch, because he talks us through his own discomforts of sitting with the professor, of going back and visiting the professor, of being like, oh man, I feel so guilty that I said I would come visit and I never did, and now he has ALS and I found out on TV and I'm going to go visit him decades later.
Considering everything you're saying, I'm intrigued to hear that the sense of joy in this book is done well.
Yeah.
And it's honestly
I
probably
wouldn't
one
use
of its
joy to describe
high
it as Kelly
points. Do you disagree with him?
Not that I disagree. It just joy feels happy to me, but it wasn't necessarily joy. But you could tell the joy from the professor, from his perspective of acceptance of death.
It's challenging to write joy because I think if you write a book that's very serious and brooding, people will take it seriously.
Yeah.
But if you write a book that's overly joyful, sometimes it comes off like sickly sweet.
Is joy the same as content?
A little unpalatable.
Ramya, what if I use the word instead of joy or content as satisfied? It's a very satisfying read.
Okay.
Yeah. And the whole point is, right, the professor has come to terms. Like, he walks us through the bad days and all that stuff, but he has come to terms with death, and he is just fully present with his debilitating or like his pending death. And it's just that comes through fully, and it's very interesting to go through it. Anyways, the book I wanted to shout out quickly at this point is When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi, and that was a memoir that he wrote after being diagnosed with terminal cancer, brain cancer, as a neurologist. And he just wrote down his journey of like being a doctor, caring for people who have brain cancer, amongst other things, other conditions, and then eventually having to die a similar death, and what he went through with his family. And that is, like, I never stopped crying during that book. That was not joyful at all, but it was so good. It cut so deep.
It was affecting, if anything.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
You want to move on to the next submission,
Yes.
Mr. Paul Daniel?
Paul Daniel, he gives us a list of 5 because he just couldn't pick one. But all of these are available in audio or on Audible. So
The guy reads like 6 books a week. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. As Long as the Lemon Trees by Zelfa Kadu, and this was published in 2024, available in audiobook format. The Death of Expertise, The Campaign of Established Knowledge and Why It Matters by Tom Nichols, published in 2017, available through Audible. Consent, a Memoir by Jill Simon, published in 2024, available in through Audible. Sandwich, a Novel by Catherine Newman, published in 2024, available through Audible. And Hope for Cynics, The Science Behind Human Goodness by John Michalke, Janelle Shockey, also published in 2024 and available in Audible. Thank you, Paul, for the curated list. Let's just bring him back on in January and we'll do a rapid fire review of all 5 books.
Yeah, there you go. You already chose your submissions. This will be easy. I'm sure you can talk about those easily.
Exactly.
Let's play another audio submission. This from Sadine Lowe.
From previous years, you know that I'm all about my guns and sex. I stand by my earlier statement. There's nothing like a man who can find my trigger point the way he finds the trigger of his gun. Well, if your 2024 is anything like mine, it required a few more crazes than previous years. 2024 had me diving into the world of fantasy romance. I can't choose just one book, but Anastasia Wilde brought me guns, sex, true mates, romance, and men that growl. Yes, ladies, men that growl. Anastasia gave us everything you could want in a book. She took me on adventures through the spirit world, running through the woods, hiding out in abandoned cabins with secret weapon compartments, and fighting featuring guns, grenades, and other things that go boom. At this point, there's only 4 books of hers I haven't read, and she has 7 series with 36 books. Be forewarned though, not all of them are audiobooks, but trust me, you will go hunting for the rest. She'll keep you busy. In the same vein, we have Julie Treadle. Listen, I wanted to be the damsel in distress, so I could be carried out of a burning building, dodging gunfire, only to discover I'm the one made for him. The suspense, the tension, the wild ride, and for heaven's sake, why are we running from our true mates? Kiss me, claim me, bite me. 2024 also gave us a sequel to A Thousand Boy Kisses by Tilly Gold. Grief is a terrible thing for those of us left behind. But just because we're broken doesn't mean we aren't still beautiful. If you want to feel deeply and pretend it's because of the book you're crying and not your own unresolved grief, read it. If not, still read it. It's worth every second and every tear. It takes you all around the world and helps you understand how each country grieves differently but so beautifully. Lastly, we have Honey and Spice by Baba Bolo. Meet Kiki, the friend who always warns us about the bad boys, only to kiss when I find out maybe he ain't so bad after all. If you've ever said, you just don't know him like I do, this book is for you. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, everyone. May 2024 steal your breath away and maybe give you a real boyfriend who growls. Happy reading.
Celine, I love you.
Oh, that one's
my
for the girls,
gosh.
clearly. Man who growls. That's the real Christmas
What did she
present.
call this? Fantasy romance? Like the 4 out of 5
Romantasy.
book? Romantasy? Oh, yeah. Oh, that's what it is, Celine. It's romantasy.
You can tell the passion was there, eh? Sadine loves
I share an Audible account with this
author.
girl. I'm telling you, it's
Really?
It's scary.
That'll mess up your algorithm real good.
Right? Yeah. Books for me. No, books for Sadine.
Not for you, Rams. Why not? Why can't you get
I
to
have
romantasy?
not delved into this side at all.
Oh, okay.
Like at all. But Sadine has delved into all of it, so we can split the difference for an average listener.
Romantasy is one of the fastest growing genres in
Huge.
2024. It's massive.
Huge.
And I don't know if it's fair, but when I think of romantasy, it's smut. I don't know if that's true. People just love the smut, don't they?
Yeah. What do you call that? Erotica? Is that
it's like,
smut?
It's like erotica plus.
Erotica plus.
It's
there a
erotica.
plus?
It's erotica with the great scenes beforehand. It's not just pizza deliveries anymore, you know.
Yeah, they've gotten a little bit more creative with it. Like they got dragons and wizards and
Well, you
Okay,
need
that's
dragons.
the fantasy part.
You need
But
dragons.
yeah, exactly.
we're not just talking like BDSM or whatever when we're talking smut.
No comment.
Yeah, you brought up
I gotta-
BDSM. I don't.
No, I am asking a clarifying question here, guys. When you said smut, I thought that's different than erotica for a particular reason, but it sounds like you guys are just
It's the
talking
same
about
thing.
romanticism.
Erotica
50
is
Shades of
Rated
50
R
Shades of
romanticism.
Dave over here. You know.
And on that note,
Guys, this was super fun. Honestly, a lot of good recommendations here. We'll make sure to include all of them in the podcast description. I want to thank everyone for sending in their submissions. There were quite a few people we didn't get to. Bonus points to people who sent voice messages. Super appreciated. Dave, super appreciate you tagging along. We should do this more often.
I'm always happy to be here. Thank you for having me. It's always a bit of a bromantasy when I hang out with you two crazy kids.
Wow.
Bro, okay. Did you have that one ready?
Look at you.
Rams, any final thoughts before we leave to wrap up 2024?
Aw, yeah, it's happening. I've only been here for like 2 months and then like 2 months on the other end of the year. So yeah, I've been here for a grand total of like 4 months, but it's been a lot of fun. And I always appreciate every kind of recommendation and review and talk we have on audiobooks. So thank you.
Yeah, and we have a lot more planned next year where we got our schedule pretty packed. Thanks to you, Rams. We appreciate your work. Happy Christmas, happy holidays, and happy New Year.
Holidays.
Bye. That's all the time we have for this edition of AMI Audiobook Review. You can find a repeat of AMI Audiobook Review Saturdays and Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern. The show is also available on your favorite podcast platforms, any of them, and that includes YouTube. If you go on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel and like our videos. We really appreciate it. And leave a comment if you want. We will get to it. We'd love your feedback, and we want to do more episodes like we did today. Thanks for joining us on AMI Audiobook Review. I'm Jacob Szymanski. I was with Rami Almathan and Dave Brown. Have a good one. Happy New Year.